Back at Bridge Division, we were kind of discussing how to take this presentation and where to go with it, and pretty quickly we came up with the Rainbow Bridge project out in Beaumont District. This was a paint rehab job there were many positive takeaways with this project, and we're going to discuss some of those examples, then look at bridge rehab projects kind of in general, and give you guys some ideas to kind of be aware of when dealing with this type of work. So, going to give a quick overview of the bridge. We're going to look through some of the initial inspection records and assessments that kind of resulted in the recent paint rehab. We'll look at some defects and repairs, kind of go over the contract cost, look at some successes and takeaways from this project, then finish with what is successful rehab implementation, how do we go about making that happen. So the Rainbow Bridge project is a through truss out in Beaumont. It connects Port Arthur with Bridge City. If you've seen this bridge before, you probably noticed how steep the bridge looks. It's got 5% grades on either end of the through truss, and this allows for about 170 feet of clearance for ships to pass underneath. So this bridge was built in '38, rehabbed in '97. As part of that rehab, it included a complete blasting and repainting of the structure. There was a redecking that was done, and there were also some measures taken to strengthen some of the compression members on the bridge. Now, this is sitting in a very highly corrosive environment, and so after about maybe 10, 12 years, that paint system that was put on in '97, we started to see many paint defects. And so that kind of sparked some further investigation. In 2011, we did a fracture critical inspection. The critical finding here was they found cracks in many of the floor beams, but it also did find widespread corrosion and section loss and pack rust throughout the bridge. 2012 routine inspection, superstructure rating came back as a 4. This was partly due to many of the defects found that previous year. Then 2013 coating assessment. This was done by the Coatings and Traffic Materials branch. They essentially found that enough of the coating was failing with corrosion already initiated in the steel to warrant a complete blast and repaint. And so overcoating was not practical in this situation. There would have been way too many locations to overcoat. All right, so this is kind of the typical defects that we were finding on the bridge. We're not 100% sure, but this could have been due to improper surface preparation before the paint was being applied, or maybe inadequate primer where the primer wasn't mixed properly before being applied. And so again, this was widespread throughout the structure. Just kind of looking through one of the main cords. This photo kind of shows, sometimes when they apply this paint either on nuts and bolts, in this case rivet heads, one side, like one face of that hardware can get missed by that paint application, so you kind of see corrosion on a single face on those rivets. And then we started getting into paint defects where you kind of have to start asking yourself if it's affecting structural capacity of the structure. So we can kind of see maybe there's pack rust beginning here, maybe a tiny bit of section loss. And again, once those chlorides have gotten into that steel, any paint system you put on top of that is not going to last long. So we really only expect about 15 to 20 years out of these paint systems, out of the rehab paint systems. Okay, and so one of the critical locations on this project were the primary gusset plates. So you can see right here is kind of that critical section where we're finding a bunch of pack rust and section loss. And there were some reports that came back as having up to 50% section loss in these locations. And that's where the thickness of that plate. And so we took that into consideration. We created a detail for it. So here's that main cord, and then here are the gussets here. And so we have an outside and an inner gusset, and we're mostly concerned right here with the inside. It's kind of where we seem to see the most significant section loss. And I know it's tiny, you probably can't see that, but we applied this detail to 50 of the 256 bottom cord main gusset plates. So a lot of plates received this treatment. And so we blasted off the pack rust. We went ahead and cleaned and painted it. So that's a System 3A paint. And In this particular section, we had about 40% section loss. And then in some areas that needed it, we put a Termarust sealer where we had more of the significant section losses at those gussets. And that sealer is a corrosion-resistant sealer. It has an excellent wetting property that allows it to kind of fill seams and cracks and get into hard-to-reach areas. And so that's that beige color there. So one more thing. So at this point, we have several primary gusset plate locations with significant section loss, and you kind of really have to start thinking, is this affecting the structural capacity of the structure? And so two things. First of all, these primary gusset plates it's a complicated detail where the location of these plates are. You have vertical members, you have horizontal members, you have the main cord, and so removing these plates and replacing them would be very difficult. You're also 170 feet in the air. We're trying to support that or create some sort of temporary shoring would be difficult. And so the thinking was that we could live with the potential loss of capacity so long as it meets the load rating. And sure enough, we did a load rating with the assumed section loss in these gussets, and we had plenty of load carrying capacity. We even created a Excel spreadsheet that kind of analyzed each single gusset location, and that checked out as well. And so we called it good with just the paint repair for these. Another structural detail that got repaired were the cracks in the corners of these floor beams. This was at several locations. It was a simple detail. This is kind of what we're looking at for these cracks. We went in, drilled a hole to kind of arrest and stop that crack from growing, then field welded that crack. So there were some components of the bridge that we had to completely replace, right? I mean, it's 100% section loss here. Luckily, we had a really good contractor on the job that did a good job at finding locations that we had actually missed in the plans. It seemed like every other week or so, he'd send us a new wave of locations that he was finding as he was going through the bridge. And that was a big benefit to us. Again, here's another plate with 100% section loss right there. And that would be this one that got replaced. And so again, you have section loss right here in the bottom of this channel, this flange. And you got to ask, well, how's that affecting structural capacity? It was decided here that we would just live with the paint repair, that there was enough redundancy in these plates and the cord and the bracing as a whole that we could just live with just the paint repair detail. And last, I was just kind of showing how damaging that corrosion can be. I mean, it's reduced the thickness of that flange down to a knife edge. These did get replaced. Several of these angles got replaced. Okay, so cost estimate. Our estimate came in at 28.6, and the winning bid was at 26, so about $2 million underneath our estimate. If you look at the other bids here, we have 31, 43 million, and 48 million. So we're now approaching at 48 million, double our estimate, right? And that kind of shows you the nature of these types of paint projects. They're very difficult to estimate. And if we go, I was going to say something else there. They're difficult to estimate, and that's due to, there's many variables involved, but the contractors have a specific set of resources available to each one of them, and that a lot of times can dictate or can have large swings in how those bids come in. So we had a total, this is a lot of information showing the change orders. We had a total of 7, and I've kind of broken them up here. We had most of the change order was due to the steel repair. We're at 1.2 million of the 1.5 total in the change order. So most of that change order was steel repair, and we did expect that. Up front, the project was kind of rushed to get out, and so we didn't really have a chance to do a very thorough hands-on inspection. And so we knew there were going to be some steel repair areas that didn't get addressed. And again, we did have a good contractor that was finding those areas, and so we were okay with increasing that quantity and paying for the extra steel repair because these were areas that needed to get addressed. And to date, they're at 28.4 million paid to the contractor, so we're right at our estimate. So some successes on the bridge. We had a really good consultant team out on this project. They had a professional paint inspector that had their eyes on the project full time. That was a huge benefit. Again, our experienced structural rehab contractor, we had a very good working relationship with them. We could call them up, they would call us, they could send us pictures, we could approve them or disapprove them. So having that was a big help. And they were eager to look for opportunities, right, to find extra locations, and they were capable of doing that work. Traffic control improvements was another success on this project. I'll kind of go through that a little bit. So on the left here, we have Rainbow Bridge. On the right, we got Veterans. And the initial traffic control setup was set up such that there was a single lane closure on Rainbow Bridge. And so we had a single lane westbound, 2 lanes eastbound. And so for morning traffic, it didn't take long for us to get some complaints. And so there was estimated about 40 minutes of delay for folks trying to get westbound on this single lane. So it was a simple solution. We just detoured another lane westbound on Veterans Bridge and have a single lane eastbound, at least for the morning rush hour traffic. So that was before 9 a.m. This was our configuration. And then between 9 and 3 p.m., we actually had a full closure on the bridge. And this allowed full access to the bridge. It created a safer work environment for the contractor, for traveling public. And it also created a safe detour for overheight loads. So there was no chance for the overheights to come through construction zone and maybe interfere with construction equipment or people. We just completely detoured them over to Veterans Bridge. All right, so successful rehabilitation implementation. So on our end, this is kind of the procedure. This is what we kind of experience and what we see. We'll first go out and do a field assessment. This is where we'll go out to the bridge, we'll take photos, we'll document deficiencies, condition of the bridge. We'll come back to the office, and if warranted, we'll write a bridge condition survey. And this is just our kind of formal record of the bridge condition. And then we'll go on to plan preparation, which a lot of us in this room are probably very familiar with, where you could have meetings, coordination, project-specific awareness. What I mean by this is these rehab type projects are very unique, and so it's important to be aware of the type of work that's being called out in the plans for these jobs. Schedule and sequence of work, of course traffic control, and all these items here can kind of affect and dictate how these plans change, right? It can change the final plan set. Once that's finalized, project's let and awarded, and then rehab and construction can begin. And then last thing is we want to document changes to the bridge that have been done. So now, from time to time, we find that we don't have good documentation on our projects, and so it's important that, especially if we're doing structural repairs, that is documented so that when the next guy goes out there, he has an accurate historical account of what's been done at the bridge, and the right decisions can be made as far as what the right type of repair is, okay? So I want to dive a little deeper into project-specific awareness. Of course, for Rainbow Bridge, this was all clean and paint was the majority of our work, and so I kind of outlined the systems here and when to use these systems. 1A and 1B are going to be your overcoats. System 2 is for field painting bridges not along the coast. Rainbow Bridge was System 3A, so that's for coastal bridges, field painting coastal bridges. Then your 3B and Type 4 are going to be your shop painting new steel. And really, this is a very general summary. I've included this slide to actually redirect you to another presentation that's been made by Johnny Miller and the Coatings and Traffic Materials branch. So this presentation, painting practices, preferred practices, here's kind of the pathway to get there. This completely breaks down item 446. It does a really good job of giving a ton of information, photos. It gives you the hows and the whens and the whys to use what type of system. So if you have a paint rehab type project, that's a very good resource for you. A few more resources, just want to throw them out there really quick. I know we're probably familiar with the DMS, Materials Producer List. Both can be found on the construction page of our TxDOT main site. Then Concrete Repair Manual. I know we've had a couple presentations on the Concrete Repair Manual in the past, but this is gives good guidance on concrete repair and can be found in your TxDOT manuals and Crossroads. And Rehab and Construction, I'm just kind of pointing out some contacts that can assist. Again, I mentioned the Coatings and Trap Materials branch and their paint inspection team. These guys are led by Johnny Miller, and they're a really good resource if you have paint rehab projects. We have 3 structural steel inspectors that we utilize. They're positioned on several jobs over the state, but we have 3 of them currently. And then there's the 4 of us at Bridge Construction and Maintenance: Kevin Krusky, Leon Flournoy, Dr. Dew, and myself. So if you got any questions, here's our contact info. And that's all I got. Do we got questions? Any questions?